So tonight we're going to talk about a theme that is related to a theme we covered a couple weeks back. I believe it was week 22, when we talked about God's patient forbearance. And in that week, we specifically looked at this cycle that we find throughout the scriptures, and the cycle was this: that in the history of redemption, there's this repeating pattern of sin that grows to be more and more until men fill up the measure of their sins. And when it's widespread, and when perversity and abominations increase, along with that, as men's sins go up and the abominations increase, God's kindness and patience forbearance matches it, right? Meets it. Until we kind of reach that tipping point and God's like, okay, I've had enough. This is too much. And then God meets that sin with judgment. And so his glory and salvation is ultimately put on display through saving a group of people through the judgment. Okay? So that was week 22. And we saw that the purpose of this ultimately in Romans 9:18 and following, Paul explains that the purpose of this cycle is ultimately that God has put on display for vessels of mercy, that's those he's saving, his divine power and his wrath by expressing that wrath towards sinners. And the people throughout the scriptures who watch the judgment unfold, like Noah watched the earth flood, as he's being saved through that, he is coming to an intimate understanding of the sinfulness of sin, how horrible sin is, how much God hates it, that he would destroy the whole earth with a flood. Why would God want Noah and his offspring to know that about himself, to know his power in his wrath? Well, because it makes the salvation all the sweeter. Okay? So tonight we're going to talk about judgment again. We're in Genesis 6, but we're specifically going to look at judgment from a little bit different angle. I'm going to read the text, and then I'll ask a question to get us started. When man began to multiply on the face of the land, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose. Then the Lord said, My spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. His days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of man, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And the Lord regretted that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart. So the Lord said, I will blot out man whom I have created from the face of the land, man and animals and creeping things and birds of the heavens, for I am sorry that I made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his generation. Noah walked with God, and Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight, and the earth was filled with violence. And God saw the earth, and behold, it was corrupt. For all flesh had corrupted their way on the earth. And God said to Noah, I have determined to make an end of all flesh, for the earth is filled with violence through them. Behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Make yourself an ark of gopher wood. Make rooms in the ark and cover it inside and out with pitch. This is how you are to make it. The length of the ark, 300 cubits. Its breadth, 50 cubits. And its height, 30 cubits. Make a roof for the ark and finish it to a cubit above, and set the door of the ark in its side. Make it with lower, second, and third decks. For behold, I will bring a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh, in which is the breath of life under heaven. Everything that is on the earth shall die. But I will establish my covenant with you. And you shall come into the ark, you, your sons, your wife, and your sons' wives with you. And every living thing of all flesh, you shall bring 2 of every sort into the ark to keep them alive with you. They shall be male and female. Of the birds according to their kinds, of the animals according to their kinds, of every creeping thing on the ground according to its kind. 2 of every sort shall come into you to keep them alive. Also take with you every sort of food that is to be eaten, store it up. It shall serve as food for you and for them. Noah did this, He did all that God commanded him. Then the Lord said to Noah, "Go into the ark, you and all your household, for I have seen that you are righteous before me in this generation. Take with you 7 pairs of all clean animals, the male and his mate, and a pair of the animals that are not clean, the male and his mate, and 7 pairs of the birds of the heavens also, male and female, to keep their offspring alive on the face of all the earth. For in 7 days I will send rain on the earth, 40 days and 40 nights, and every living thing that I have made I will blot out from the face of the ground." And Noah did all that the Lord had commanded him. Noah was 600 years old when the flood waters came upon the earth, and Noah and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives with him went into the ark to escape the waters of the flood. Of clean animals and of animals that are not clean, and of bird and of everything that creeps on the ground, 2 and 2, male and female, went into the ark with Noah, as God had commanded Noah. And after 7 days the waters of the flood came upon the earth. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, on the 17th day of the month, on that day all the fountains of the great deep burst forth, and the windows of the heavens were opened, and rain fell upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. On the very same day Noah and his sons, Shem and Ham and Japheth, and Noah's wife, and the 3 wives of his sons with them entered the ark, they and every beast according to its kind, and all the livestock according to their kinds, and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth according to its kind, and every bird according to its kind, every winged creature. They went into the ark with Noah, 2 and 2 of all flesh, in which there was the breath of life. And those that entered, male and female of all flesh, went in, as God had commanded him, and the Lord shut him in. The flood continued 40 days on the earth. The waters increased and bore up the ark, and it rose high above the earth. The waters prevailed, increased greatly on the earth, and the ark floated on the face of the waters. And the waters prevailed so mightily on the earth that all the high mountains under the whole heaven were covered. The waters prevailed above the mountains, covering them 15 cubits deep. And all flesh died that moved on the earth, birds, livestock, beasts, all swarming creatures that swarm on the earth, and all mankind. Everything on the dry land in whose nostril was the breath of life died. He blotted out every living thing that was on the face of the ground, man and animals and creeping things and birds of the heavens. They were blotted out from the earth. Only Noah was left, and those who were with him in the ark. And the waters prevailed on the earth 150 days. But God remembered Noah and all the beasts and all the livestock that were with him in the ark. And God made a wind blow over the earth, and the water subsided. The fountains of the deep and the windows of the heavens were closed. The rain from the heavens was restrained, and the waters receded from the earth continually. At the end of 150 days, the waters had abated. On the 7th month, on the 17th day of the month, the ark came to rest on the mount of Ararat. And the waters continued to abate until the 10th month. In the 10th month, on the 1st day of the month, the tops of the mountains were seen. At the end of 40 days, Noah opened the window of the ark that he had made and sent forth a raven. It went to and fro until the waters were dried up from the earth. Then he sent forth a dove from him to see if the waters had subsided from the face of the ground. But the dove found no place to set her foot, and she returned to him to the ark, for the waters were still on the face of the whole earth. So he put out his hand and took her and brought her into the ark with him. He waited another 7 days, and again he sent forth the dove out of the ark. And the dove came back to him in the evening, and behold, in her mouth was a freshly plucked olive leaf. So Noah knew that the waters had subsided from the earth. Then he waited another 7 days and sent forth the dove, and she did not return to him any more. In the 601st year, in the 1st month, the 1st day of the month, the waters were dried from off the earth. And Noah removed the covering of the ark and looked, and behold, the face of the ground was dry. In the 2nd month, on the 27th day of the month, the earth had dried out. Then God said to Noah, "Go out from the ark, you and your sons and your sons' wives with you. Bring out with you every living thing that is with you of all flesh, birds and animals and creeping things that creep on the earth, that they may swarm on the earth, and be fruitful and multiply on the earth." So Noah went out, and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives with them, every beast of every creeping thing and every bird, everything that moves on the earth, went out by families from the ark. Then Noah built an altar to the Lord, took some of every clean animal and some of every clean bird, and offered burnt offerings on the altar. And when the Lord smelled the pleasing aroma, the Lord said in his heart, I will never again curse the ground because of man, for the intention of man's heart is evil from his youth. Neither will I ever again strike down every living creature as I have done. While the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease. All right, so question. When God carries out judgment on the earth, whether it be upon the earth here as we just read in this story of Noah and the ark and the global flood, or as we'll look at here in a moment, there are many other judgments when God pours out his wrath upon a people. We're not talking about God judging a particular person, but when God judges the world or he judges a group of people, what is his purpose in that judgment?
To cleanse. I mean,
What do you mean?
man was so wicked that the judgment, he just cleansed everything. He had his remnant that was saved, but everything else was literally cleansed, washed away.
Yeah.
To vindicate his name.
Sure. Certainly to vindicate his name in that what would God be saying if he didn't punish sin, right? If he just let sin go indefinitely. Yes, we saw a few weeks back about the forbearance of God as patience, but he cannot forbear forever, right? Because Satan could come to God and say, well, hold on a second. You say you're righteous. You say you're holy. And yet you aren't punishing sin. You said in the day they eat, they'll die. They're still alive. Adam's going to live almost 1,000 years. And why are you forbearing? I mean, Cain kills his brother and you didn't put him to death. So what's going on here? So God punishes, particularly when it's whole groups of people like that, in order to proclaim his holiness and hatred of sin, how serious sin really is. Anything else? Adeline, when God punishes a whole group of people, why do you think he does that? Why do you think he pours out his wrath on the world or on a whole group of people sometimes in the Bible, like in the flood? Why do you think he did that?
Because all the people were being really bad and not believing in Jesus and trying to kill people, sort of.
Yeah. Now, they didn't know exactly that it was Jesus they weren't believing in, but they did know that God had promised that there would be a seed of the woman who would come and crush the head of the serpent. We know that that ultimately was Jesus. But they weren't trusting God's promise to send a deliverer, were they? And because they weren't trusting God's promise to send a deliverer, they were very violent, and they were stealing, and they were committing all kinds of horrible sins against God. Anything else?
So I think it's to make himself known.
Yeah, to make himself known. Explain.
His power.
Yeah. Communicate his power, communicate his wrath, his holiness and hating sin. Yeah. So that's all correct, but Chandra is spot on in terms of the theme that I want to trace out. When we see that God destroys the world with a flood, there is something there in that he's washing the world, so to speak. The theme then, in considering the judgment of God, is that God is purging the land of evil. Why? Well, he wants to make the land more suitable for his purposes. But what is his purpose specifically for the land, for the world? It's specifically so that the land would be a fit place for his people to dwell with him. Okay? And so a world filled with violence, where he says every thought of man's heart is evil continually, and the whole earth had become corrupt, and all flesh had corrupted its way on the earth. These are God's words concerning the state of the world. It took about 1,500 years of human history to get to that point. That's not a fit place for God to dwell with his people. In fact, Noah is the only guy who's his people at this point. Noah's the only one who's righteous. He's the only righteous man in his generation. But the world is no longer a habitable place. It's not a fit place for Noah because of the state of corruption. So God is going to cleanse the world. He's going to purge it. He's going to purify it of wickedness so that the world would be an appropriate place for his people and for him to be able to dwell with his people. So take a look again at Genesis 6, 6, and 7. You see there, it says that the Lord regretted that he had made man on the earth. It grieved him to his heart. So the Lord said, what? I will blot out man, whom I have created. From where? From the face of the land. Man and animal and creeping things and birds of the heavens, for I'm sorry that I made them. And so this language of blotting out, this is the idea of cleansing, right? I'm going to cleanse the what? The land. Cleanse the land of sinful man. Now, just to be real clear, God does not regret. This is just Moses speaking of God in a human way. We call this an anthropomorphism. It's a big fancy word meaning to talk about God as though he were a man. 1 Samuel 15:29 very clearly says, God will not lie or have regret, for he is not a man that he should have regret.
He's got a purpose for everything he does.
Right. We've said a million times, right? He doesn't have plan Bs. He didn't get to this point and go, oh, shucks, why did I do this? Right? Like that never happens. But something in his heart is looking at the situation and it's grieving him. It's grieving him. God does experience grief. Okay, so we got that so far, right? That's the theme we want to trace out. The judgment of God poured out on the world or on specific peoples is ultimately to purge the land or the earth of evil in order to make it a suitable place for his people to dwell and for him to be able to dwell with his people. All right, so turn to Leviticus 18. We've seen this now with the global flood, but then we jump forward several hundred years, and as God has formed the nation of Israel, bringing them out of Egypt, he's going to lead them into what we know as the Promised Land. This is the land of Canaan. And as he's leading them there, we have this commentary in Leviticus 18, beginning at verse 24. It says, do not make yourselves unclean by any of these things. He had just given a list of really abominable sins. For by these, the nations that I'm driving out before you have become unclean. And verse 25, the land became unclean, so that I punished its iniquity, and the land vomited out its inhabitants. So you have this language, this picture of the land just like, why do we vomit, right? Why do we throw up? Yeah, there's something objectionable inside of us and our body's rejecting and going, listen, this can't stay in here anymore. It's going to make me sick. It could be poisonous, whatever the case may be. It's nauseating. The land is experiencing this. We have this metaphor here. Verse 26, but you shall keep my statutes and my rules and do none of these abominations, either the native or the stranger who sojourns with you. And then look down at verse 28, lest the land vomit you out when you make it unclean, as it vomited out the nation that was before you. For everyone who does any of these abominations, the person who do them shall be cut off from among their people. Well, why should they be cut off? Why should the person who does these abominations, which he had listed earlier in the chapter, why should they be cut off? It says, if you don't cut them off, meaning if you don't kill them, these certain sins carry the death penalty. If you don't do that and you let them continue to dwell in the land will be defiled and it will vomit you all out. And you won't be able to dwell here anymore. Now turn a few pages to Numbers 35. So number one, we said that when God judges, when he carries out his judgment on the world or on large groups of people, it's in order to cleanse the land. So it's a fit place for his people to dwell, but also that he would be able to dwell with them in the land. Numbers 35:34 says this, you shall not defile the land in which you live, in the midst of which I dwell. For I, the Lord, dwell in the midst of the people of Israel. Yes, Adeline.
What does mist mean?
The mist in the middle of, the center of. So if we said, oh, God is in our midst, it means he's right here with us. He's not outside. He's not over there. He's not in Fort Myers, right? He's here around us. Okay? So he says, I'm going to dwell in the midst of, in the middle, with my people Israel, in the land that I'm giving them. So don't defile the land. Why? Because I live there. I dwell with you. And so if you're defiling the land, it will no longer be a suitable place for me to live. The Lord is of purer eyes than to look upon evil. He can't dwell with Israel if they're doing such abominable things that even the very land itself would vomit them out. Okay? I mean, you think about it, for land, and again, this is obviously personification, speaking of the land as though it were a person, but if the very land would throw you out, would reject you, how much more God who created the land? Okay, so here we see again, God had purged the land of the evil. He says that the Amorites, that they had to fill up the measure of their sins. Their sin had to ripen, and then God cast them out, cleanses the land, purges it of the evil, and then instructs Israel, don't do the same thing because you'll be pushed out too. And don't do it because my purpose is I'm cleansing the land so that I can dwell with you in it. All right, next stop. Turn to Numbers 14. So after God promises that he's going to give this land to Israel, what happens? Before he actually delivers the land into their hand, before the land vomits out its inhabitants, he had formed Israel as a nation, had brought them through signs and wonders out of Egypt, and on the way to the promised land, they send some spies, and those spies come back, and all but two give a bad report about the land. And God is very unhappy about this because it reveals an unbelief. They're not trusting that God's good and that he's truly able and willing to give them the land. They say, listen, we were like grasshoppers in the eyes of the inhabitants of this land. We'll never be able to get this land. And God's very offended by their unbelief. And so Numbers 14, verse 22, God speaking to Moses says, none of the men who have seen my glory and my signs that I did in Egypt and the wilderness, and yet have put me to the test these 10 times and not obeyed my voice, none of them shall see the land that I swore to give to their fathers, and none of those who despise me shall see it. Now, you might hear that and go, okay, yeah, well, listen, they didn't deserve to get in the land, right? I mean, they didn't believe that God would give it to them. They don't deserve it. And so God's punishment is very simply, they're getting what they deserve. And that's absolutely true. Most certainly, these individuals, really the whole generation, they're being punished because it's justice. But also understand that God is not merely punishing this generation because he's meting out justice, but because he wants the land to be cleansed. He's purging from the Israelites this group of people and their unbelief before he lets the rest of the Israelites go into the land. Why? Well, what do you think? I mean, if they all went in together, if that generation that was full of unbelievers went in with them, how long is it going to take before the land is filled with abominations again and the land vomits them out and it's no longer a habitable place for the Lord to dwell with them, to dwell in their midst? Look down at verse 33 of Numbers 14. He says, and your children shall be shepherds in the wilderness 40 years and shall suffer for your faithlessness until the last of your dead bodies lie in the wilderness. According to the number of days in which you spied out the land, 40 days, a year for each day, you shall bear your iniquity 40 years, and you shall know my displeasure. So not until every single one of them perishes will the rest of them be able to go into the land. He's not just meting out punishment. He's not just carrying out justice. He's purging the land so that it's a suitable place for his people to dwell and for him to dwell with them. Let's look at Exodus 29. As you're turning there are multiple places in Deuteronomy where God says things like, you shall walk in the way that the Lord your God has commanded you. Why? So that you may live and that it may go well with you, that you may live long in the land that you shall possess. Right? He says this over and over in the book of Deuteronomy. Keep my law so that you can live long in the land. God wants his people to live long in the land. He doesn't want them to be driven out. He doesn't want to have to pour out his wrath. He doesn't want the land to vomit them out. He wants to dwell with them. They're his treasured possession, he says. And so his wrath, his judgment had come upon the Amorites in order to purge the land of wickedness so that he could dwell with his people. So now, having driven out the nations of Canaan, God actually promises to dwell with them. Exodus 29:45. I will dwell among the people of Israel and will be their God. They shall know that I am the Lord their God, who brought them out of the land of Egypt. Why? That I might dwell among them. So the very purpose for which God took them out and saved them from Egypt, he says, is so that I might dwell among them. That's his purpose here. And so as he takes them out of Egypt, he has to cleanse this land, though, of the evildoers. So Leviticus 26, 11 and 12, he says, I will make my dwelling among you, and my soul shall not abhor you, and I will walk among you and will be your God, and you shall be my people. Yet look down at Leviticus 26:34, because then again God warns them and says, this is his warning, one of many things that will happen if they break his law, if they break his commandments, if they don't keep covenant with him. Then the land shall enjoy its Sabbaths as long as it lies desolate while you are in your enemy's land. So God says the land's going to vomit you out, right? You're going to go in exile. And during that time, while you're not in the land's going to enjoy its Sabbaths. It's going to have rest. What's that mean? It means that it's going to have rest from all your wickedness. The land's not going to have to endure you in your sinfulness treading upon the earth anymore. And so he says, verse 35, as long as it lies desolate, it shall have rest. The rest that it did not have on your Sabbaths when you were dwelling in it.
It's interesting that it's not just the animals that suffer the curse, but the land.
Right. The land needs rest, right? In Romans 3, I'm not exactly sure which verse it's quoting, when it says, in their paths are ruin and misery, right? Meaning wherever you walk, wherever your feet touch the ground, in your path, ruin and misery. That's a human being by nature, born in sin. Everywhere you go is ruin and misery, just what's left in your wake. And so the land needs rest because Israel had continued to sin and rebel against the Lord, did not keep his law, did not keep his covenant. And so the land will vomit them out. In Numbers 35, I'll just tell you about this one. God will say that blood will pollute the land. That if somebody murders another person, that nothing can make atonement for the land except for the blood of the person who killed them. Which is interesting because, again, Cain killed Abel, and God says, listen, the blood which the earth opened up to receive your brother's blood is crying out to me from the ground. Now, God, in his mercy, did not kill Cain, but he says here to the Israelites, one of you murders the other, their blood, the ground soaks it up. The only way that you can atone for that blood entering the earth, you got to kill the man who was the murderer, right? You have to make atonement for the land. Why? What does that mean? To purify the land. The land is no longer pure because you've spilled innocent blood on it. He'll go on and say in Jeremiah 2:7, he says, and I brought you into a plentiful land to enjoy its fruits and its good things, but when you came in, you defiled my land and made my heritage an abomination. This is God's commentary on hundreds of years of the Israelites' history, dwelling in his land. He said, I come and I bring you into this land flowing with milk and honey, and when you came in, what'd you do? You made an abomination. You defiled my land. And when he says my heritage, you've made an abomination. When God says his heritage, what's somebody's heritage? It's your inheritance. He's saying this land, when he says it's mine, it's not like, yeah, the whole earth is God's, right? And all the fullness thereof. He owns everything. But my particular inheritance, my particular possession, my prized possession, my pride and joy, the apple of my eye, was this land. Why? Because God really, really just loves the desert and the wilderness and like this little spit of land in the land of Canaan? No, I mean, there's plenty of places on the earth that are far more beautiful than the Middle East. That's not why. There's nothing that's like so unique about this land that he just loves this land. It's because it was the place that he had chosen for his people to dwell so that he could dwell with them. And he says, you've made the land such that it's no longer habitable for me. I can't dwell here among you anymore. Your sin has made an absolute mess of the land. You've defiled it. And because I'm holy, I can no longer dwell there with you. Now, moving on. I just quoted Jeremiah. In Jeremiah's day, he was pointing forward to what would happen when God would actually send the Israelites into exile. Babylon's going to come and take captive the Israelites and bring them into captivity in Babylon. And so for 70 years, they're going to be sent. Turn to 2 Chronicles 36. Why is God going to send the Israelites into exile for 70 years? Now, 70 years is a long time, you've got to understand. 70 years, this is by far and away the longest the Israelites have been removed from the land. Why is God so upset? Well, he says in Ezekiel 6, I'll just read this to you. He says, Then those of you who escape will remember me among the nations where they are carried captive, how I have been broken over their whoring heart that has departed from me over and over with their eyes that go whoring after their idols. God's heartbroken over the idolatrous heart of his people. That's why he sends them out of the land for 70 years. 70 long years. In Jeremiah 29, there's a false prophet who is telling the Israelites, oh, no, listen, it's not going to be that long. It's just going to be like a couple years, no big deal, just like all the other times, right? God will bring us back. And the Lord, speaking through Jeremiah, sends a letter to the Israelites and says, no. Don't listen to that guy. He's wrong. It's going to be 70 years. In fact, listen, build houses, plant vineyards, get married, bear children, seek the welfare of your city. Settle in is what he's saying. Just settle in, because your whole life is going to be spent in a foreign land as an exile. Not until your children or maybe even your grandchildren will you be brought back into the land of Israel. The land of Canaan needs its rest. So now we're in 2 Chronicles 36. 36 verse 20. So this is an explanation of what happened here. Nebuchadnezzar took into exile in Babylon those who escaped from the sword, and they became servants to him and his sons until the establishment of the kingdom of Persia, to fulfill the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah. Why? Until the land had enjoyed its Sabbaths. All the days that it lay desolate, the land kept Sabbath to fulfill 70 years. So that's why. God said the land needs a rest. It needs a rest from you, because you are polluting it. Your idolatrous heart pollutes it. You're spilling innocent blood, it pollutes it. Your religious system that you've corrupted, my whole priestly order, it's polluting it. It's defiled. I can't dwell there. I delivered you out of Egypt so that I might dwell with you. I purged the land of all of its inhabitants so that I might dwell with you. And now you've become so wicked, I can't dwell with you. I can't dwell in the land anymore. It needs a rest from you. It needs a break, 70 years. And so he sends them into captivity. Now, Ezekiel 37, verse 26, God says, I will make a covenant of peace with them. It shall be an everlasting covenant with them, and I will set them in their land and multiply them, and I will set my sanctuary in their midst forever. My dwelling place shall be with them, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. Then the nations will know that I am the Lord who sanctifies Israel when my sanctuary is in their midst forever. Well, that's interesting, that God would say he's made a covenant of peace, an everlasting covenant. And what's the mark of this everlasting covenant? He's going to set them in their land, multiply them, and set his sanctuary, his temple, in the midst forever. Well, what do we know happens after this? Well, after the exile into Babylon for 70 years, the Medo-Persians, led by King Cyrus, are going to come, conquer Babylon, and they're going to allow, through Ezra, the priest, and Nehemiah, they're going to allow them back into the land of Israel. And slowly but surely, the temple will be rebuilt. But guess what? That temple gets destroyed. Turn to Daniel 9. The temple in Jerusalem is going to be destroyed. In fact, Jerusalem itself will be destroyed. And when is it going to be destroyed? It's destroyed in AD 70, roughly 40 years after Christ's death. So Daniel 9, beginning at verse 26. We're kind of jumping into the middle of the prophecy here, but let's just pick out the piece here that's relevant. Daniel 9, 26. And after the 62 weeks, an anointed one shall be cut off and shall have nothing. This anointed one is Christ. The Christ, that's what anointed one means. Christ literally means anointed one, the Messiah. This anointed one shall be cut off and shall have nothing. And the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. Its end shall come with a flood, and to the end there shall be war. Desolations are decreed. And he shall make a strong covenant with many for 1 week, and half of the week he shall put an end to the sacrifice and the offering. What does it mean to put the sacrifice and the offering? It means the temple is going to be destroyed. So Christ is going to die, then there's going to be one who lays siege to the city, and then the temple is going to be destroyed. Turn now to Luke 19, because Jesus himself is actually going to foretell, he's going to prophesy about this very event. The interesting thing here, reason we're considering this judgment of God in AD 70 on Jerusalem and the destruction of the temple, is because we've said when God judges a people, it's often to cleanse the land, to purge it of evil, to make the land a suitable place for his people to dwell so that he can dwell with them. But we've seen that after he did that with Israel, Israel goes in the land and they make it what? It says, you made my heritage an abomination. You've defiled my land. I can't live there with you anymore. And the land is going to vomit you out. And it happens over and over and over. But then after the exile into Babylon in Ezekiel 37, I read to you, God says, listen, the day's coming when my sanctuary will be in your midst forever. You go, well, hold on a second. Okay. And probably the Jews would have had some hope kindled there, because when the temple was rebuilt, they're like, well, hey, the temple's being rebuilt. Here we go. We're going to live in the land forever. Are you though? Because Daniel says, no, the day is coming when the anointed one will be cut off and then the temple will be destroyed. So Luke 19, beginning at 41, Jesus is drawing near to Jerusalem, and it says, when he drew near and saw the city, Jerusalem, he wept over it. Well, why is Jesus weeping over a city? He says, would that you, even you, had known on this day the things that make for peace. He's saying, you don't recognize me, I'm the Messiah. I've come here to bring peace between God and man, and you don't recognize it. But now, the things that make for peace, they are hidden from your eyes. For the days will come upon you when your enemies will set up a barricade around you, surround you, and hem you in on every side and tear you down to the ground, you and your children within you. And they shall not leave one stone upon another in you, because you did not know the time of your visitation. Look at Luke 21. Now Jesus will give even more specifics about this event. There in Luke 19, he just literally was drawing near to Jerusalem and he began to weep, right? And just cried over it. But now he's going to give instruction to his disciples about what's really to take place. In Luke 21:20, he says, but when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then know that its desolation has come near. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let those who are inside the city depart. And let not those who are out in the country enter it. For these are the days of vengeance, to fulfill all that is written. Alas, for women who are pregnant and for those who are nursing infants in those days, for there will be great distress upon the earth and wrath against this people, the Israelites. They will fall by the edge of the sword and be led captive among all nations, and Jerusalem will be trampled underfoot by the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. And then, of course, there was another time, I don't have the text in front of me, but where Jesus was passing the temple and his disciples are marveling at the temple and like, man, look how big the stones are, and how beautiful it is. And Jesus says, the day's coming when not one stone will be left upon another. Okay. Jesus says, no, Daniel was right. What he foresaw was right. Jerusalem will be besieged, its people will be destroyed, and the temple will crumble, and it will never be rebuilt. So what do we do then with this promise in Ezekiel 37 that a sanctuary will be in their midst forevermore? He purges the land. He gives them the land. He dwells with them in the land. The land vomits them out because of their wickedness and because they have made it an abomination and defiled it. But God makes this promise, no, the day is coming, though, where I'm going to dwell with you forever. My sanctuary will be in your midst forever. But then when Christ comes, he says, yep, the day's coming real soon. Right? We're talking 40 years, plus or minus a few, where Jerusalem will be destroyed. And ultimately, the Jews will be dispersed out of Jerusalem and out of the land. Well, before we answer that question, one thing I want to point out that this is actually a fulfillment of the law. We had looked at Leviticus 26, when it says that I will lay waste your cities and make your sanctuaries desolate. I will not smell your pleasing aromas. I myself will devastate the land so that your enemies who settle in it shall be appalled at it, and I will scatter you among the nations, etc., right? And then the land will enjoy its Sabbaths. That was God saying, when you break my covenant, you break the law, that's what's going to happen to you. And the ultimate fulfillment of Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28, all the curses of the law, they were poured out upon Israel in AD 70 when Jerusalem was destroyed and the temple was destroyed. Like, to the finest detail. When he says things like, women will eat their afterbirth, their placenta, women actually did that. Josephus records it. Yeah, all the horrors that you read about in Deuteronomy 28 and Leviticus 26 actually happened in Jerusalem when they were besieged for several years by the Romans. Now, we move on to the final judgment. Turn to Luke 17. All of these lesser judgments, these are all foreshadows, right? There are types of the ultimate final judgment. Jesus says, verse 26, just as it was in the days of Noah, so it will be in the days of the Son of Man. They were eating and drinking and marrying and being given in marriage until the day when Noah entered the ark and the flood came and destroyed them all. Likewise, just as it was in the days of Lot, they were eating and drinking, buying and selling, planting and building. But on the day when Lot went out from Sodom, fire and sulfur rained from heaven, destroyed them all. So it will be on the day when the Son of Man is revealed. Okay? Now, look also at 2 Peter 2. We have these two places in which the New Testament authors, including Christ himself, speak of these lesser judgments. I mean, when we say lesser judgment, just stop for a second. Lesser judgment, the global flood, the wiping out of millions, maybe billions of people at that point, 1,500 years of humanity, wiped out. That's a lesser judgment. But that lesser judgment is a type of the final judgment to come. 2 Peter 2, beginning at verse 4. For if God did not spare angels when they sinned, but cast them into hell, and committed them, the angels, to chains of gloomy darkness to be kept until the judgment, if he did not spare the ancient world, but preserved Noah, a herald of righteousness, with 7 others, when he brought a flood upon the world of the ungodly, if by turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah to ashes, he condemned them to extinction, making them an example of what is going to happen to the ungodly, and if he rescued righteous Lot, greatly distressed by the sexual conduct of the wicked, for as that righteous man lived among them day after day, he was tormenting his righteous soul over the lawless deeds that he saw and heard. Then, if these things are true, then the Lord knows how to rescue the godly from his trials, and he knows how to keep the unrighteous under punishment until the day of judgment, and especially those who indulge in the lust of defiling passion and despise authority. So again, all of these lesser punishments, those are just pointing to the greater final judgment of God. God, if he knew how to do all that, right, he knows how to keep sinners under condemnation until the final judgment. And how is it that he's going to do this? We'll look down at chapter 3, 2 Peter chapter 3, beginning at verse 5. We've been talking about God purging the land. Well, he purged the whole earth through water, but then he promised he wouldn't do that again. Now he is going to purge the whole earth through fire. He's going to purify the world for the elect through fire. 2 Peter 3:5. For they deliberately overlook this fact. This is the unbelievers who say, where's God? He says he's coming back. In fact, just look up one verse. They say, where's the promise of his coming? Ever since the fathers fell asleep, all things are continuing as they were from the beginning of creation. They just take for granted that God is kind and patient and forbearing and long-suffering. Everything is just going on the way it's always gone on. He says, yes, but they deliberately, verse 5, they overlook this fact that the heavens existed long ago and the earth was formed out of water and through water by the word of God. And by the means of these, the world that then existed was deluged with water and perished. Right? God was able to use the very elements of the earth, the physical creation, in order to judge sinners. He created the world with water and through water, and then he took that water and he wiped out mankind and purged the earth of wickedness. Okay? And so then he says, verse 7, but by the same word, the heavens and the earth that now exist are stored up for fire, being kept until the day of judgment and destruction of the ungodly. Then verse 8, but do not overlook this one fact, beloved, that with the Lord 1 day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as 1 day. The Lord is not slow to fulfill his promise, as some count slowness, but is patient toward you, not willing that any should perish, but that all should reach repentance. Verse 10, but the day of the Lord, it'll come like a thief. And then the heavens will pass away with the roar, and the heavenly bodies will be burned up and dissolved, and the earth and the works that are done in it will be exposed. Since all these things are to be thus dissolved, what sort of people ought you to be in lives of holiness and godliness, waiting and hastening the coming of the day of God, because of which the heavens will be set on fire and dissolved, and the heavenly bodies will melt as they burn. But according to his promise, we are awaiting for new heavens and a new earth in which righteousness dwells. You see, God is not merely going to bring about this great purging fire in order to just punish sinners. It's not just simply I'm pouring out my wrath, I'm pouring out my anger, I'm manifesting my justice. Yes, and amen to all of that. But his purpose is to purify the earth, to purge it. Now, when we see that things are going to melt and all that, and then he says a new heavens and a new earth, it's not like the earth is going to cease to exist, right? God is going to renovate this earth. In fact, just turn to Romans 8 for a moment. I think it's important that we see this. Sometimes we think new heavens, new earth, and we see all this burning language and we go, ooh, okay, yeah, new heavens, new earth. God's like going to totally destroy the earth. It will exist no more and he's going to build from scratch. But that's not the case. In the very way that God does not destroy us and then create us anew from nothing. No, he renovates us, so to speak. He regenerates us. He doesn't say, well, okay, let me take a fresh lump of clay and make you anew, make you a second time. No, you're born again. He takes that sinful lump of clay and makes it a new creation. He cleanses it, right? And so in the same way, in Romans 8, look what God says about the earth. We had looked at this, I believe, when we talked about his forbearance. Romans 8, beginning at verse 20. For the creation was not subjected to futility willingly, but because of him who subjected it in hope. That it means that God subjected the earth to futility. Why? Verse 21. So that the creation itself will be set free from its bondage to corruption and obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. For we know that the creation has been groaning together in the pains of childbirth until now. See, the creation, it's waiting for us to be redeemed, for us to be made clean and whole. Why? Because then it knows that it's going to be remade. And so just as we've been purged of sin on that day when our adoption is finalized and our flesh is gone, the creation wants to undergo the same kind of renovation, the same renewal. So this fire of God, this purging, this burning, things are melting and dissolving and all that. It's not that all the material universe will just cease to exist and be a pile of ash. No, God is purging it like a refiner's fire, right? You put gold in and then burns off all the dross, all of the impurities burn off and are scraped off the top and you're left with pure, unadulterated 24-karat gold. That's what's going to happen to the earth. And why is God doing this though? He's doing this again to make the earth a habitable place for his people so that he can dwell with his people. So turn to Revelation 20. Revelation 20, beginning of verse 11. This is the great and final judgment. Then I saw a great white throne and him who was seated on it. From his presence earth and sky fled away and no place was found for them. And I saw the dead, great and small, standing before the throne, and the books were opened. Then another book was opened, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged by what was written in the books, according to what they had done. And the sea gave up their dead who were in it. Death and Hades gave up the dead who were in them, and they were judged, each one of them, according to what they had done. Then death and Hades were thrown into the lake of fire, that is the second death, the lake of fire. And if anyone's name was not found written in the book of life, he was thrown into the lake of fire. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. How's there a new heaven and a new earth right now? Because all the wicked have been purged. You see that? See the order there. You see the purging happens, and now we have a new heavens and a new earth. A new place where righteousness dwells. A new place where God's people can dwell and God can dwell with them. 21:1. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, Behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. He will dwell with them, and they will be his people, and God himself will be with them as their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more, neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain any more, for the former things have passed away. And he who was seated on the throne said, Behold, I am making all things new. And he said, Write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true. And he said to me, It is done. I'm the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To the thirsty I will give from the spring of the water of life without payment. The one who conquers will have this heritage, and I will be his God, and he will be my son. But as for the cowardly, the faithless, the detestable, as for murderers, the sexually immoral, sorcerers, idolaters, and all liars, their portion will be in the lake that burns with fire and sulfur, which is the second death. So you see that order. There's this great purging of wickedness, and then there's a new heavens and a new earth, and then God says, I will dwell among you. My dwelling place will be with man. Because only then will the earth be a suitable place fit for God, and ultimately a suitable place fit for us. Because in that day, we will not have sin anymore. So when we see these promises in Ezekiel 37 and God saying, listen, you're going to dwell in the land forever. My sanctuary is going to dwell with you in your midst forever. I'm going to live with you forever. We're talking about here, new heavens and new earth. That's the fulfillment of this. So now the question though has to be, how can God dwell with us? Because here's a problem. God destroyed the earth in a global flood and he kept Noah. Was Noah sinless? No. I mean, Noah, we know at the very least, one sin is recorded that he got drunk. He gets off the boat and he gets drunk. And so Noah is not without sin. We know that he wasn't without sin because his sin was passed on to his offspring, because Ham, he will be cursed, and his son Canaan will be cursed, and his lineage through him, because he had uncovered his father's nakedness, which may be a euphemism not for, hey guys, look, Dad's laying naked in the tent. It might actually mean that he slept with his mother, because that is a euphemism throughout the Old Testament of uncovering a man's nakedness is to sleep with his wife. Okay, so that came from Noah. I'm not saying Noah did that, but that's his son. The sin is being perpetuated through his offspring. So how is the earth suddenly a place that's habitable for God and his people? Well, that's the story of the Old Testament, right? I mean, that's the story. It's like, okay, the Amorites, they're going to get real wicked to the earth, till the land vomits them out, and I'm going to purge the land of them so that I can bring my covenant people in there. And then he says, yeah, I gave you the land, and when you came in, you defiled it. You made it an abomination. My heritage, my prized possession, you made it an abomination. I can't dwell there anymore. I got to kick you out for 70 years so we can just have some rest. So how is it then that by the time we get to Revelation, we have these fulfillments that God says, listen, I'm going to purge the earth of all the wicked, right? We saw this list here. It says, but the cowardly, the faithless, the detestable, the murderers, the sexually immoral, the sorcerers, idolaters, and all liars. Well, you know what? That is quite a list, because you might read that and go, well, oh, hey, man, you know, I haven't murdered anybody, which, I mean, we all know that we've murdered in our hearts, Jesus says. But, you know, yeah, I haven't murdered any. Okay, are you faithless? You ever been faithless? You ever been a coward before? Right? I mean, I think all of us have been a coward at some point. Anybody who's been cowardly.
If you haven't said any of those things, and you're the last one, which is a lie.
Right. And I love it says, and all liars. Those specifically, and all liars. Like every kind of liar. So I don't think you're getting off on that one. Like, well, I haven't told big lies. All liars. We got a problem here, right? How can this be? How can God dwell with us if his judgment is designed to purge the world of all unrighteousness so that he can dwell with his people? Well, what does that have to do with us when we are still in ourselves so very much unrighteous? How does this happen? Well, go back to Genesis 8. I want us to see something here in Genesis 8 in the text about Noah. So Genesis 8:1, there's this little note here, this little word. But God remembered Noah. God remembered Noah. And then he causes a wind to blow over the earth and the waters subside. You have to remember that as God is destroying the earth, and yes, he instructed Noah to craft an ark and put Noah in the ark and sealed up its door, yet if God does not remember Noah here, Noah's going to die, okay? He only got so much fruit on that boat, okay? If he's like, all right, listen, I saved you from the flood, but guess what? Now you're just adrift at sea, and there's nowhere for your boat to land, and you're going to run out of food, right? He's going to die. And it's going to be a horrible death. It's going to be a long, slow, painful death, in fact. But God remembered Noah. He remembered him with mercy, with favor, with compassion. And so look at Genesis 9, beginning at verse 8. God will then make a covenant with all flesh, with all the earth, a covenant to preserve the earth. He says, Then God said to Noah and to his sons with him, Behold, I will establish my covenant with you, with your sons and your offspring after you, and with every living creature that is with you, the birds and the livestock, and every beast of the earth with you, as many as came out of the ark. It is for every beast of the earth. I establish my covenant with you, that never again shall all flesh be cut off from the waters of the flood, and never again shall there be a flood to destroy the earth. And then God said, This is a sign of the covenant that I'll make between me and you and every living creature that is with you. For all future generations, I have set my bow in the cloud. It shall be a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. When I bring clouds over the earth, and the bow is seen in the clouds, I will remember my covenant that is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh. And the water shall never again become a flood to destroy all flesh. When the bow is in the clouds, I will see it and remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that is on the earth. Then God said to Noah, This is the sign of the covenant that I've established between me and all the flesh that is on the earth.
Do you think like when we have like literal rainbows that's God like establishing his covenant with us?
Absolutely. Yeah. And interesting that he says, when you see it, he doesn't say, Listen, look, I'm going to comfort you with the presence of a rainbow. So when you see it, you go, Oh yeah, God's not going to. And it is comforting. It should be. But it's interesting in the text, he says, When I see it, I will remember my covenant. Now, does God forget? No, he's speaking, again, anthropomorphically as a man. It's not just that, I hadn't thought about that in a while. He's saying, no, as I'm being perpetually provoked to judge this world, when they set the bow, the rainbow in the sky, I will remember this covenant, meaning I will keep it, right? I will be faithful to my word to preserve the world. Think about you don't have to turn there, but in Genesis 19:29, God comes to Abraham, and the two angels go down to Sodom and Gomorrah while God, through the angel of the Lord, is conversing with Abraham. And he says, shall I keep from Abraham, my servant, what I plan to do, seeing that through him, all the nations of the earth are going to be blessed. Through him is going to become a great nation. No, I should tell him, right? And then ultimately, Abraham pleads with God to not destroy Sodom and Gomorrah for the sake of the righteous. He ends, he says, listen, what if there's, I believe, 30? What if there's 30 righteous? I won't destroy the city for the sake of the 30. But God couldn't find the 30, or maybe it was 10, or whatever the number was. 10. All he could find was Lot. And Lot was righteous because of his faith. But it's interesting that in Genesis 19:29, Moses doesn't say, and because Lot was a righteous man by faith, God delivered him. That's not what it says. It says, so it was when God destroyed the cities of the valley, God remembered Abraham and sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow when he overthrew the cities in which Lot had lived. Because God was remembering a covenant that he made with Abraham. He was remembering Abraham and his love for Abraham, his faithfulness towards Abraham, his favor over Abraham. And so for the sake of Abraham, he delivered Lot from the city of Sodom and Gomorrah when it was being burned in judgment. This idea then of remembering ultimately will come to fulfillment in Christ. Turn to Luke 1. This idea also of remembering, I missed one, but turn to Luke. When the children of Israel are in Egypt, they had gone down there, they've been slavery for 400 years, and they cry out to the Lord. It says this, during those days, many of the kings of Egypt died, and the people of Israel groaned because of their slavery and cried out for help. Their cry for rescue from slavery came up to God. God heard their groaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac and Jacob. God saw the people of Israel, and God knew. It was because he remembered this covenant promise that he had made with Abraham. And what was the covenant promise? Through your offspring, all the nations of the earth are going to be blessed, meaning through your offspring will come the Messiah. And so he heard the cries of the people of Israel. Well, here, how is God going to respond in fulfillment of that covenant? What is he going to do when he remembers his promises of Genesis 3:15 to send the seed of the woman, to remember his covenant to Abraham, or really to Noah, that and the all flesh, that he will not destroy the earth? Why won't God destroy the earth with a flood? Because he's seeking to preserve it till the seed of the woman should come, till his Messiah would come. That's why he preserves the earth. And this covenant with Abraham, that through his offspring all the nations of the earth will be blessed. Well, this is seen in Luke 1. So Zechariah, he is a priest, and his son John the Baptist is born. And as he is born, John the Baptist being the forerunner of Christ, the Elijah who is to come, the one who would preparing the way of the Lord, as he's born, Zechariah prophesies and says this in Luke 1, verse 68. Blessed be the Lord God of Israel, for he has visited and redeemed his people and has raised up a horn of salvation for us in the house of his servant David. Now, he's not saying his son is the horn of salvation, but he's saying the fact that my son is the forerunner of the Christ means that the Christ is also here. Verse 70, as he spoke by the mouth of his holy prophets from of old, that we should be saved from our enemies and from the hand of all who hate us, to show the mercy promised to our fathers and to remember his holy covenant, the oath that he swore to our father Abraham, to grant us that we, being delivered from the hand of our enemies, might serve him without fear in holiness and righteousness before him all of our days. And so here he has remembered his covenant. Thousands of years later, when John the Baptist is born, his father can say, this is the promised one who would come before and make the way straight for the way of the Lord. He's the one that will be the forerunner of Christ. And so God's salvation is upon us. God has remembered, just as he remembered Noah on the ark, as he passed through the waters and delivered him, just as he remembered Abraham and so saved Lot, just as he remembered Abraham and so saved the Israelites, he remembers his covenant with Abraham and sends his son into the world. Well, what did he send his son to do? We'll turn to John 1, verse 14. We've said the theme that we're tracing out is that God's judgment is not merely about punishing sin. It's not merely about putting on display his character. It's not merely about vindicating his name. It's not merely about meting out justice. His judgment is often and ultimately about purging the land, purging the earth of wickedness, to prepare it as a place for his people to dwell so that he can dwell with them. And so, having remembered his covenants, he now sends his son into the world. And John 1:14 says this, and the Word, speaking of Christ, became flesh. He became a man. And what? Dwelt among us. This word dwelt, you may have heard it before, taught or preached. The word dwelt literally means tabernacled. He tabernacled. He took up his dwelling place among us. And we've seen his glory. Glory is of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. God sends his Son into the world to dwell among us, to tabernacle among us, to make his home among us. Now, turn to Luke 23. This is our final passage. As God sends the Son into the world to dwell among us, what are we talking about right now? We're just simply asking the question, how can God dwell with us, right? If his judgment is about purging the earth to rid the land of wickedness, shouldn't we have been purged along with everyone else, right? Like, we have sinned the sins that are in that list of everybody who goes into the lake of fire, all the people who are not permitted to enter the new heavens and the new earth. We've sinned all those sins. How can God dwell with us? Well, it's because he has remembered us in faithfulness and in mercy. And in remembering his covenants, he has sent his Son to tabernacle among us. And why, though, did he send his Son to dwell among us? Well, as Christ is on the cross, he is framed on his right and his left by two thieves. And the one thief, as Jesus is dying, Luke 23:42, we're just going to read verse 42. The thief sees Christ and says, Jesus, remember me when you enter into your kingdom. Remember me. Well, that's an odd thing for a man to say, isn't it? A man who's a convicted thief, probably an insurrectionist, possibly a murderer, remember me? Do you really want the Lord of all the earth to remember you? I mean, truly, it might be more fitting for him to say, Lord, forget me. Please forget me. For a sinner to be forgotten of God and for the Lord no longer to take notice of him would be a mercy indeed. Right? Forget me, Lord. But remember, all these things that we've traced out, when God sent the flood to cleanse the earth of violence and corruption, Noah and his family were carried safely through the waters of God's wrath. And afterwards, when the waters abated, God preserved the earth through a promise. Why, we asked? Well, so that the seed of the woman might come, who would carry sinners through the waters of God's wrath and through the fires of final judgment. And just as God delivered Lot, he didn't deliver him for his own sake, not because of his own righteousness, not even because of his own faith, but on account of Abraham. And just as God delivered the Hebrews from their bondage in Egypt, not for their own sake, but because of his promise to Abraham, God is able to deliver this thief. Not on the account of his works. I mean, the man has none, right? He's literally nailed to a cross. Even if he repents in this moment, there's nothing he can do. There's no good work he can do at this point. He's about to die. He has no good works, but for the sake of Jesus Christ, who is the seed of the woman to come. And so it's here at the cross, as Jesus is hanging alongside this thief, it's here that Jesus is crushing the head of the serpent. And therefore, the dying thief, beholding the fountain that was opened for him in the hands and the feet of Jesus, this fountain for the washing away of his sins, as he beheld the Messiah dying and yet forgiving the very ones who were crucifying, saying, Father, forgive them, they know not what they do. In faith, he says, not forget me, Lord. He doesn't say, Lord, just let me escape your attention and avoid your wrath. No, the thief cries out, remember me. And what does Jesus reply? The very next verse, Luke 23:43. Jesus says, truly, truly, I say to you, today you will be with me in paradise. See, Christ was willing and able to remember the thief in his dying day, in his dying hour, and to say, you will be with me in paradise today. You will dwell with me today, because Christ was dying for him in that very moment. And so the great purging that takes place when the earth is burned up, which is that full and final judgment that the global flood was only an echo of and only a shadow of, right? A foretaste of. That was the lesser judgment. When the earth is burned up and all sinners are purged from it so that the land is purified, and then we see God inviting into it this heavenly Jerusalem descending down, and we say, how can this be? How could there be anyone there? This is how. That thief will be among the righteous who are raised up to newness of life, given new bodies, and will inhabit a new heaven and a new earth where righteousness dwells, and God will dwell with them, because here Christ purged him of his sin. Christ, he was the ark that Noah passed through the waters, right? That ark symbolized Jesus on the cross, that we, being hidden in him by faith, would pass through the waters and the fire of God's judgment and be brought out safely on the other side. And God remembers us. He remembers us just as he remembered Noah. He remembers us with mercy and with faithfulness and with favor. There's a hope that comes with judgment because we're delivered from it, and that judgment of God, it's purging. It's purifying. He's purging the earth so that he can prepare the world to be a suitable place for his people to inhabit, where he can dwell with them. That's the purpose, ultimately, of judgment. Yes, it's for God's glory. Yes, it's to vindicate his righteousness and his holiness and hatred of sin, to vindicate his name and to mete out justice because he's a holy God. Yes and amen to all of that. But ultimately, the purpose is he's purging this world so that we can dwell here with him. That's his goal, that we would be his treasured possession and that he could dwell in our midst. I think that's why when we read in the Psalms in particular, but other places as well, it is appropriate for us in some measure, to long for the judgment, to long for the judgment. And while on the one hand, when you think of the individual, it's like, no, I want to preach the gospel to you that you'll be saved from the wrath of God. But on the other hand, it's like, come Lord Jesus, come, right? Make an end of all this mess, purge the world, make it a suitable place, and make me a suitable inhabitant for it, right? But it's interesting. Romans 8, God is going to make you renewed first. And this world will no longer be a suitable place for you to dwell. You will be too holy for this world when your adoption is finalized and your body is renewed. This world will not be a suitable place for you. And so the creation waits with eager longing for you to be revealed in your glory, because it knows when you're revealed in glory, it will be renewed as well. It will be set free from futility, because it knows, as it is right now, this world is not suitable for you.